Wow. Right. Okay.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. We're just about get ready to start. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Yahira Mehian. I'm the library manager for the Bloomington Library. Great. Hi. Okay. We're just about get ready to start. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Yahira Mehian. I'm the library
Sorry about that. Okay. There we go.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you. All right, so I just want to officially welcome everyone to the Bloomingdale Branch Library. This is very exciting. I'm happy to have the Bloomingdale Neighborhood Collection, History Collection downstairs. And I think it's very exciting to have those files here. I myself have browsed through them. It's just great to see the different history for the Bloomingdale neighborhood. And I've been wanting to have something like this for such a while. I asked Vida and Wynn for this opportunity. So I'm happy to see so many of you attend the first reading at our branch. Hope you have a great evening today with the presentation, and thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you, Yahira, and thank you all for coming today, both in person and online. My name is Vida Wallace, and I'm a member of the Bloomingdale Neighborhood History Group, which began as the Park West Village Neighborhood History Group in the year 2000. Our group has presented talks and walks for more than 2 decades, focusing on the neighborhood between 96th Street and 110th Street on the west side. Today, I will introduce our neighborhood history collection, which is near the circulation desk downstairs for you to explore whenever the library is open. Our notable walking tourist, Jim Mackin, will follow me to give you a taste of neighborhood history. Our celebrated blogster, Pam Tice, will share a wide selection of tools and sources for your own research. And finally, we will invite you to tell us in 1 minute flat what you've already dug up and how. Our online host and hero, Michael Gonzalez, whom you just met, will take comments and questions in the chat and relay them to us in the room as well. So feel free to chime in online. What have you enjoyed digging up on neighborhood history, and how did you do it? Before we get started, we are delighted to have with us today the How-Tos historian, Robert Snyder, who has been most supportive of the sort of grassroots history we do. I will just lend him the microphone for a minute so he can say a few words. So happy to have you with us, Rob.
Thank you very much. I don't want to take up too much time because it's a valuable presentation that's set up for tonight. But I just want to say 2 things. One, it's great to see so many people out here at an event dedicated to the history of the Bloomingdale neighborhood. This is wonderful to see this many people who are actively engaged with understanding the past. And what's exciting about seeing so many people here is you are, as one of the mottos of your organization, so it nicely puts together, the preservers, the creators, and the interpreters of your own history. You live this every day. This is part of your lives. And the work that you do in community organizations, in your families, in your neighborhood is the raw stuff and history. And understanding our past and its relationship to our present is hugely important if you want to understand where you've been and where you're going. And it is at the local level in neighborhoods that we see some of the biggest and most important issues in New York City emerging in 3 dimensions in front of your eyes. It's well worth understanding. I would be happy to come back in the future. I was thinking about what I might do in the future for you all. I do a lot of work in oral history. I'd be happy to come back in the fall and do a session. If people want to learn how to do oral history, I would be very, very happy to share what I've learned over the years. Right now, I'm editing a collection of oral histories, first-person narratives, poetry about the pandemic in New York City in all 5 boroughs. And I'll be done with that, I hope, by the end of the summer. And I'd be really happy to come back in the fall and share what I've learned about doing oral history over many years so that you can do it. I think there's no better way to understand the history of a neighborhood than to talk to the people who've lived with it. That's what we do with oral history. So glad to be here, and I'd be happy to come back.
Thanks again. So. Let's see. I'd like the next slide. Okay. I think I got it now. It's the left button. The Bloomingdale Neighborhood History Collection. It was a labor of love between the years 2000 and 2003 on the part of many members of the emerging history group. But at the opening here on September 16th, 2003, a special hand was given to Hedda Fields and Ginger Leaf for their cataloging efforts. And I can tell also from the files that Wynton Armstrong had a great deal to do with putting them together. And Liz Ivanchek-Friedman also corralled a lot of people and spoke at that opening. So it was crowdsourced from organizations in the neighborhood before that was even done. We'd like to thank the library staff for caring for the collection for many years. And we'd like to encourage you to delve into the files as well as to contribute to them. It's an easy place to find inspiring stories that expand your neighborhood.
You'll probably first notice the books about New York City history on top of the file cabinets. The books were donated by Peter Salwin, author of the legendary Upper West Side Story. You're welcome to read them in the library. Just be sure to return them. The back one. I took going forward too.
I'll try using the arrow. So just,
Go back.
yeah, go ahead. No? If not, you can just scroll through this. So if you scroll upwards,
Okay, that's what I want. The catalog. The catalog. Thank
sorry
you.
about that.
So our main collection is inside the cabinets. Leaf through the catalog to get a sense of its breadth. The files are grouped by subject, and between the A files and the X files, we cover everything from churches, businesses, to politics, to geology, to the arts. The contents of each file is suggested by the title, but the individual pages are not listed in the catalog. They vary from newspaper articles, pictures, ephemera, handwritten letters, to dissertations. Once you find a file that interests you, take it to a comfortable table or an armchair to read and enjoy. If you can't make it to the library, browse a few choice tidbits of our files we have scanned and posted online. go to our website, upperwestsidehistory.org, click on BNHG Library Collection and follow the link. Click on the picture of each document to read it in full. But the physical collection in the library is so much larger, it's well worth visiting the library if you can. The heart of our collection is the materials about the old community on 98th and 99th Streets that was dispersed by urban removal in the 50s. That's Fire J. When Armstrong, always a gale force in the history group, recalls, we started in 2000 when I got an email on our listserv in Conquest Village to say, does anybody know anything about the history of Conquest Village? So I gave it to them, and 75 people came, and 75 people said, I couldn't find do it again. So I asked the person from Trinity Church to join me because Trinity Church was the only building left on 37 acres of otherwise destroyed buildings in the 1950s. And we have that picture. It looks like a bombed place, which in essence it was. You can read in the collection the speech Robert Moses gave when Conquest Village had finally got built on that desert. And he loved it. If not triumphed over his critics. But he did not get the lesson. This is Dorothy Denby, whom you'll find in the people section. It seems she was the one who introduced the emerging history group to Jim Terrain, who had grown up in the old community. So Jim Terrain, who had grown up in the old community, joined the group and contributed generously to our files. Peter Arnson, Jerry the Bedlam of our group, recalls that the many different social organizations that came out of the 99th Street Block Association supporting raising kids in the neighborhood. That was huge to me, and it was just such a telling statement. This tight-knit community did not allow themselves to be separated from each other when their homes were demolished. They continued to reunite every year until 2016 with live music, dinner, and dancing. 60 years of reunions, clearly the last word about their extraordinary community. But read all about it in the files downstairs. We're happy to have with us today Betsy Tucker from the Trinity Lutheran Church Council and Dean Heitner, Vice President of the Park West Village Tenants Association, both of which contributed to the collection their histories entwined with that of the old community. Joys and thrills. Constantly learning, it's a joy. And following our individual interests makes the work light, whether we're creating a database of every building in the area, writing blogs about vanished restaurants, or playing music by neighborhood composers. That's kept us going all these years. But many of the aha moments I remember have come about through asking big questions, pushing each other to relate past, present, and future, and finding the intersections between people, buildings, geography, relationships between the neighborhood and social changes on a larger scale. As Ben says, we are the inheritors, the interpreters, and the creators of our history. That distinguishes us from many of the wonderful preservation groups that exist in the city, because our mission is not really preservation, It is describing what we inherited, interpreting what we inherited, creating, and recognizing that we are creating the future. Gwen and Peter have been the most passionate advocates of encouraging folks in various groups within the neighborhood to research their own histories. It's thrilling as well as sobering to recognize that we are presently creating history as well as the future. On a neighborhood scale, you can really see the impact of one person, one organization. In addition to those I've already mentioned, we have several guests from the Bloomingdale School of Music with us today. Noel Barbara, Kenneth Michaels, Barbara Michaels. We hope they'll briefly describe the experience of researching their group's histories a bit later in the program as we are beginning to open up to the question and answer period. Because many of you might enjoy doing this, perhaps for your building or your community garden. There's a terrific piece in our collection, L11002, New York Public Library, Bloomingdale Branch, by Yahira's predecessor, Susan Singer. She begins, when Wynn asked me to give a talk on the history of the library, my first thought was that this was absolutely impossible, since I knew little or nothing about the library's history. But since saying no did not seem to be an option, I began to seek out the necessary information. She quotes lushly from Miss Emily F. McCormick, Bloomingdale's branch librarian from 1942 to 1961, of whom she writes, I came to feel as though I knew her. Now let me introduce Jim Mackin, who will really bring some of the neighborhood's history to life for you, because that is what he does best.
Michael, is there a trick to this? Gotcha. Thank you. All right. There we go. So about 8 or 9 years ago, I put together a presentation in our Bloomingdale History Group about medical institutions in the neighborhood. And boy, did that get me going. I didn't realize how many medical institutions there were in the neighborhood. I didn't realize how many important historical figures were in the neighborhood. So I started collecting them. And the next thing you know, I had 1,400 notable people. And my publisher said, that's a book, but we can't do 1,400 people because that'll look like a phone directory. So instead, we took 591, and that's my book, Notable New Yorkers of Manhattan's Upper West Side. Meanwhile, the 1,400 has grown to about 1,700. So we might have to have a volume 2. But I'm working on Harlem history of notable people. And it's amazing how much of that ties back to what Vita referenced, the so-called old community of West 99th Street, where many, many famous African-Americans like Billie Holiday, who's on the cover of the book, and a couple other names you would recognize also. And that's one of my broad themes within our Bloomingdale Neighborhood History Group. I think there's too much emphasis sometimes on buildings. So here's a building that was in what became Central Park. Anybody recognize that? This is the old convent, became the convent of Mount St. Vincent. It got moved up to the Bronx. The foundation is still there. So if you walk over to what would be the intersection of about 105th Street and 6th Avenue, you'll see the foundation to this building. It came down in a fire in around 1881 or so. Here's where the great Dr. Valentine Mott lived in our neighborhood, 91st, 92nd, just off Columbus, not too far from here. He's considered the father of vascular surgery. So I won't go into all of this kind of detail, I apologize, but I just want to give you a flavor for the types of things that excited me when I started researching not only for my book, but for different presentations. And I spent a fair amount of time in our collection, which today is, as Vita's pointing out, is housed right here downstairs in our area. I'm bopping around like crazy, but here's the Bloomingdale Insane Asylum, where Columbia University is today. This kind of sets the tone for the whole neighborhood, which becomes heavily institutionalized. And I mean that in a positive sense. In 1821, this comes here and lasts all the way up to about 1891. But there are many, many other institutions. I continue to find more institutions. The hostel, the American Youth Hostel building, or Hostel International, right here on Amsterdam and 103rd Street. Pam Tice, who's going to follow me, has done a lot of history on that and research, and that's much more important than you can even realize. The Leek and Watts Orphanage, which was the second oldest institutional building in the neighborhood, is still, part of it is still with us from 1843 on the Cathedral Close. I found this building on Western Avenue and 73rd Street. It was a cancer hospital that, it was a cancer hospital that never got made into a hospital. I'll have to explain that sometime. Here's another one on 76th Street. It was a hospital. That building's still there. This was the first hospital, I think, for abusive substances, and that's on Central Park West at about 91st Street. That building's still there. This building, everybody knows the Metro Diner, but the building behind it, or just to the left in the picture here, was a Red Cross training hospital. Can you believe that? The building is like 1889 vintage, but got turned into a Red Cross hospital. There's a better picture of it. The first Pasteur Institute in the United States was just a few hundred yards from here on 97th Street and Central Park West. I bring this up in part because a resident of Park West Village, Bert Hansen, who does a lot of medical history, wrote a book about the importance of what Koch and Pasteur did with germ theory. And so that inspired me and so many other people. And his articles, his books are fabulous. First Radium Institute in America here on Central Park West. William Augustus Muhlenberg was the founder of St. Luke's Hospital, but his grandfather was the first Speaker of the House of Representatives. Anybody who watched the State of the Union address last night. There's St. Luke's when it was on Fifth Avenue. Here's an early picture of St. Luke's Hospital in our neighborhood, right behind the cathedral, which is getting built. It's a nice picture of St. Luke's. Well, we go on and on. I show you these pictures just to get me going on some of this stuff. J. Marion Sims, controversial figure because he had done some work on a slave woman down in Alabama and South Carolina. And he's the founder of the first women's hospital in the United States, which was in a couple of different locations, but wound up locating up here around 1906 on 109th Street. And that goes back to what might be argued to be the first institution in our neighborhood, and that's St. Michael's Church. And of course, we have St. Michael's right here on 99th and Amsterdam. I believe this is the third, but maybe the fourth building on the site, the current one, the Robert Gibson building from 1892. When St. Michael's came to this neighborhood, it was the first church between St. Mark's on the Bowery and St. John's up in Yonkers. And what came with it was Alexander Hamilton's widow, Elizabeth Hamilton, the daughter of General Philip Schuyler. And his granddaughter, Elizabeth Cullum Hamilton, was the founder of the Women's Hospital up in our neighborhood on 109th Street. So that's the kind of detail. Here's an early image of it. That's the kind of stuff you can research in the collection here. You'll see it's organized by institution, occasionally by name. And it'll spur you on to find other things. It's endless. Research, as Pam and I know, is not only fun, it gets addictive. You don't want to stop. And the New York Public Library really feeds that addiction. I mean, there's just wonderful stuff. And of course, you can look at the whole catalog. One of the most common uses we use, we're way beyond Peter Salin's book and even beyond my book. We get into a lot of the digital archives like maps. There are maps of our neighborhood seemingly every few years that you could check in incredible detail. And we're toying with projects that deal with the neighborhood and get into more detail. Pam may touch upon some demographic stuff we're doing, but I hypothesize that the population in our neighborhood, however we define it, is not at its peak right now, that it peaked previously, probably around 1920 or just before 1930, but we don't know until we absolutely analyze it. So here's a last image of that women's hospital on 109th Street, but this is the 110th Street side. And that little Manhattan schist wall there is a vestige from the hospital. That's actually left over. So if you walk down 110th Street and you see all that. Now here I am violating my precept that people are more important than buildings. So Pam, you want to follow up on that? You ready to go? The quintessential New York City experience is walking down some block that you're familiar with. Even tonight, I came down 100th Street, and there's the New York Circulating Library building. Does everybody know that building? The south side of 100th Street between Amsterdam and, in fact, in this library, I think they have a copy of a book that came out about 5 or 6 years ago, which is a comprehensive history of libraries in New York City. And I've been a long-term member of New York Society Library, which is the oldest library in the world. The New York Public Library is a simple conglomeration of the Astor, Tilden, and Lenox Foundation libraries from years ago. And we probably have the greatest library system in the country right here in New York, short of the Library of Congress. But this library is much more facile. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Pam Tice, who's going to talk a little bit more about researching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. I brought a handout, which was at the desk, so if you didn't get it, pick one up on the way back, but it's also on our website, so I'm going to kind of follow that. I was asked to just tell you about resources that you can use to do your own history research. So I want to thank my colleague at the history group, Nancy, who helped me make the handout look better. And then, of course, I had a typo in it anyway, so that was my fault, not Nancy's fault. Also on the first page, I'm not a trained historian. I just look like one. So I looked around to see how are historians trained to look at resources. And I found a wonderful website by the Jim, you left a lot of slides. Yay, there I am. Okay. William Cronin, who's an important environmental historian, has a website where he's teaching other historians how to do research. And I put that first on my handout because I thought it was useful if you really want to dig into this. And then if you're researching your building, you can go to the Bloomingdale Group's website and find a guide to doing building research. And I've put that there too. But here we are in a library, so let's talk books. Okay, Michael, I'm pushing the button. Okay, all right, thank you. Told you I wasn't hearing. The first part of my list is a bunch of books about New York City, written mostly in the past few years that are kind of quintessential books. So that's a start. Obviously, I couldn't give you every book about New York City because there are hundreds and hundreds of them now. But this is a good reading list for someone who wants to get started on New York City history. And then below that, I've got some books about our neighborhood. And two recent ones, of course, are Jim's book and then our other colleague in the history group, Stephanie's book on Riverside Park that came out this year. But two others about our neighborhood. Vita already mentioned Peter Salwin's Upper West Side Story. Andrew Dokart's book about Morningside Heights is a classic for our neighborhood. Another favorite of mine is old books. And of course, now with things being digitized, there are more and more very old books happening at all times. Some of the ones about our neighborhood that I put here are Hopper Spiker Mott's book on Bloomingdale, Peter's book about the history of St. Michael's Church, which is not just about the church, but a lot about the neighborhood. Riker's history on Harlem, when Harlem had a much larger geographical definition than it does now and covered a lot of our neighborhood. And then the Stokes iconography, which is a classic. All those are available digitally. So if you're doing research on and looking at old books, you'll find those online very easily. Then archives. Again, in this day and age, we get the internet, and you will, if you're Googling something, you'll very often be taken to one of these archives that are just collections of books and articles and artifacts. You'll find the Wayback Machine, which is a collection of old websites. The Wikimedia site, which is useful for media files that you have permission to use. New York history sites. Lots of people writing about New York. One of my favorites in this neighborhood is the Daytonian New York site. Again, it's about buildings, but they're wonderful stories researched about buildings in our neighborhood and all over the city he does wonderful research with old newspapers, which I'll talk about in a minute, and tells you about the people that lived in them. Podcasts, keep an eye on that if you're interested in history. Lots of people are using this as a way to communicate the history that they're researching. Instead of writing about it, they'll tell you about it. And of course, as Jim said, we're all lucky to live in a city with a world-class library that we can visit. If you're doing local history, you'll be interested in room 121, which is the Milstein collection. And that's where they have all the books on local history. If you're doing genealogy, you've probably been there already. But if you're looking for local history research, that's the room to go through. But I've also put on my handout other connections that you might want to make to other parts of the library, their digital collections and their maps. And then there we are at maps. So Jim's already mentioned how much we all love to sit and look at maps. I've given you some connections to those, and you can spend many a long afternoon looking at them. If you don't like maps, photographs. Again, I've given you some connections. to some collections. There are lots more. And we're discovering new ones all the time. And like everything else, more and more is getting put online and there'll be new discoveries. A favorite is the New York tax photos from 1939 and 1940, where they photographed every building. And they did it again in 1980. So sometimes you can find a building, picture of a building that either no longer exists or that you want to find out and have an actual picture of. And finally, newspapers, whoops, yes, moved. More and more coming online. I've given you some of the connections that I use. Some of them you need to have a subscription to. But during this time period, the New York Public Library has made some things accessible at home that you used to have to go to the library to do. So that's good. Journals, if you're doing research on something, chances are someone in academia has done some research on it already and posted it in a journal article. There's a New York History Journal that Cornell University does, but you can also get access to all the journals using search terms through this website that I've given you. I am not an expert on government research. But I found a book that's very helpful on helping you understand access to the municipal archives of the city of New York, a book that's put out by the New York Genealogical Society. And finally, zooming. Lots of organizations are doing programs like we're doing tonight, where you can sit in the comfort of your own home and learn something from them, or get out and walk around and take a tour. And Jim does tours for our organization on a regular basis. They're all posted on our website. And I recommend that you go on a Jim Mackin tour because it'll be lots of fun to see our neighborhood through his eyes. Okay, thank you.
Yes, hot off the press, one of our history professors, Rob Barber, a late December, somehow he discovered a new set of aerial photographs. Most of us know the fair time photographs from the sky. I think the time period is 1927 or so, maybe off by a year. And they're pretty good photos looking down on our neighborhood, but they're not really great and they're not digitized the same way. Another set of photographs that Rob found are, and he found them in Milwaukee. He's been in touch with the people in Milwaukee, and they're from 1924. And the way Rob described it, looking down on that neighborhood, it's so finely tuned, so finely digitized that for the Lion Brewery, and we all get frustrated as amateur historians trying to find history on the Lion Brewery, which is the largest employer in our neighborhood. Occupying 108th, 109th Street, Columbus stands in. He said that photographs are so finely tuned that you can see the barrels in the Lion Brewery. So he's got the people in Milwaukee, I think it's Milwaukee University, but in Milwaukee, starting to put that up on their website. So stay tuned. But he was just raving about the possibilities.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Pam. I wanted to mention that Pam's handout is available to download from our website, especially for those who are joining us online. That could be very helpful. So it's at upperwestsidehistory.org to download all that information, which is up to date, which is really valuable. I'd like to invite first of the guests from the organizations who have researched their own histories. Any of those who'd like to either come up to this microphone or speak from the audience. Our colleague Angel has a separate microphone. He can move around in the audience as needed. And then we'll have general questions and answers, and we'll go to the chat to see what's happening here.
I think we will. I mean, the association.
Yeah.
There we go. That's the forward. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. My name's Dean Heitner. I'm Vice President of the Northwest Village Tenant Association. Pat Walker, our president, wanted to come here, but she couldn't go. We got it. Sorry. The Tenant Association was formed in 1975, 47 years old, has a long history, and its mission, if you will, was basically to represent the tenants in Parkhurst Village, to represent them against the board. And over these 47 years, we've gone through many challenges as our neighborhood has developed and changed. Has involved all kinds of problems for tenants. Tenant Association has made history. The warranty of having a building act, which is protects tenants in New York, is there because of us. Because of us who think we start way back when. And for 47 years, we've become a fairly well-known and indeed powerful force in the community. We have made connections with our political representatives who recognize the fact that our people come out and vote all the time, and so they're available to us, and we have made that connection useful in many ways over the years. I'm not going to go through a history of the Tenant Association with you. It's too long to do that. Just want to let you know that New York University had deemed it a significant enough organization to have an archive of our own down there in Armstrong. Setting that up. There's a lot of material down there, but not everybody can get down there. There is a file here. It's not up to date, but we are committed to bringing it up to date, and would encourage you to look through it to see all of the significance of the Parkhurst Village has had in our community. Okay.
Thank you. Hello?
Hello, everyone. My name is Noelle Barbera. I am the Director of Marketing and Development at the Bloomingdale School of Music. We're always happy to join this group and share some of our history with all of you. We've been serving the Bloomingdale neighborhood, the Upper West Side and beyond since 1964. And more recently, when we were approaching our 50th anniversary, we started to delve into our own archives and try and understand more about our own histories. And our former executive director, Erica Floresca, came here and gave a presentation to this group called From House to School. We were originally called the House of Music, Bloomingdale House of Music, and now we are called the Bloomingdale School of Music, mainly because people were calling and asking to buy sheet music from us. And we were like, no, that's not what we do. We do music lessons. So we started in 1964 in the basement of the West End Presbyterian Church, started by David Greer, who was the organist there. And he saw a need for affordable access to music lessons for the children in the neighborhood. And so that really remains our mission on providing access to music education. do that. We give out over $250,000 a year in scholarships to students in need. And as we are approaching now our 60th anniversary, we are continuing to build into our history. Actually, we found more and more information in our archives. And our longtime faculty member, Monica Verona, is actually doing a major project that will culminate in the creation of a coffee table book, which hopefully we can have here in the library, maybe on top of that, on top of those cases, and maybe in your list of collection of books to reference. So we are really looking forward to delving more into that and really sharing more of that history with all of you. It's really been quite an experience. We have a lot of boxes of material at the school, which we are doing a huge project to digitize now. So we're going to really be discovering much more in that process.
You keep track of your students and their careers?
Yes, we do.
That'd be interesting.
Yes, we follow our alumni and their lives and how they go on to do different things and have families and come back to this school. And so that's a perfect segue actually for me to introduce Ken Michaels. He's a longtime pillar of our community. Once a student, now a parent, and then chairman of our board.
Wanted to know what's here. Shout out to my mom, Barbara Michaels, who is a West Sider. We were talking about buildings as buildings, but she was born at Women's Hospital, which you mentioned before. So the foundation has some meaning perhaps now. I myself started preschool in Park West Village when I was in single digits. Mom and my dad took me to concerts at what was then the Bloomingdale House of Music, as well as the Synod House at St. John the Divine. They gave concerts at both places, so that's a little bit of Upper West Side history. I took clarinet and theory, which was required at the time. It's no longer required, but we do teach theory. And then several years later, my wife and I, having lived away from the Upper West Side for a short period of time, came back to the Upper West Side, had kids, but to Bloomingdale as students, and then I became a board member and president of the board. And so that brings things full circle. So essentially the history of the Michaels family is very much the history of the Bloomingdale neighborhood and to some extent Park West Village and the environment. Thank you very much.
My name is Becky Tucker. I'm here on behalf of Trinity Lutheran Church of Manhattan. Our pastor, the Reverend Heidi Newmark, I know she's spoken to you on occasion. She wanted to be here tonight, but she had hip replacement surgery yesterday, so she's not quite up to coming out tonight. So I am the president of the church council, and we have been working through the last 2 years. We started with an intern who did a lot of research, and we've been archiving the materials that we have on site and really trying to preserve our history. It's been really exciting for me. I'm newish to Trinity. I've been there about 5 years, but we just got the scaffolding down where the church lives, right next door here. You can finally see it. So I've been looking for that scaffolding except to pull for the cracks. So we have worked really hard to preserve our building. It was built in 1908. It started with the terracotta decorations on top that were crumbling, but we've completely stabilized the steeple. We have renovated the undercroft space where we have meals and events and where the shelter stays.
Where exactly is it?
It is right next door here. It's 164 100th Street.
Okay, thank you.
And so for those of you that don't know, Pastor Heidi is actually retiring in May.
It doesn't have the windows anymore, right?
No, we don't
Okay,
have
so
windows anymore.
I was curious. I remember when they came out.
Yes. We actually ended up voting not to put them back. And the windows were sold to a church in, it's like Kansas or Kentucky. I don't remember off the top of my head. that was willing to pay for the shipping and restoration and put them in a new church out there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm new to the archives here, but I'm hoping to add some of the more recent history pertaining to the archives so that these things will carry on as well, like the history of the windows that some people will remember. So I appreciate all of your support and all the resources that help us preserve our own history in the neighborhood. Thank you.
We did have one. How do we do, oh, I can just. How do we do research by address? Is that something that the archive has, or is that something that if they don't, how would you go with that?
Research by address. So we have a limited amount of information about every building between 96 and 106. It's basically the architect, the year that they applied for permission to build the building, the year it was completed, the number of floors. All of that you can find in our building database, either on our website or in the collection downstairs printed out. But are there other ways? Maybe Pam would speak to that, or Jim, searching online perhaps, for photos by address.
So if you want to research a very specific building, contact us. But a couple other possibilities. One is to go to the landmark designation reports. In a large part of the Upper West Side, Upper West End Avenue, Riverside Drive, Wellington, Morningside Heights is now a part of landmark district. It goes through a fair amount of detail building by building. But if you're not sure, contact us. My building, I'm at 370 Riverside Drive. We just celebrated our 100th birthday. So we got everybody in front of the building, took a picture, did a history, and that history is on YouTube. And the building next to us, 375, did the same thing. And I'm gonna highly recommend 345 Riverside Drive. Anybody here from 345 Riverside Drive? It is not, my building is not a sexy building. 345 Riverside Drive is even less sexy. But the YouTube that the fellow historian in that building did is just fabulous. It explains why it's not a sexy building. So in a half hour or so, it just was a wonderful history of the building. More and more buildings are doing that. They're either getting pictures or they're contacting us and putting stuff together, pictures and but if you're really curious about your building, just contact us. As Vita said, on our website, we have 1,100 buildings listed in great detail as to who the architect is and Steve,
Jim, yeah, I'm always looking for the easy way out. And I was wondering, it strikes me that the landlords, and we know that there's been a bunch of landlords in our building, would have a list somewhere of all their tenants. Now, I don't know if that doesn't exist, or have never been able to.
I know that's not true in my building. The archives are extremely scattered in my building. I wanted to say the way to contact us, the easiest way, is through our website, upperwestsidehistory.org. There's a contact button. And I also wanted to give Gil Tauber credit for the building database. He's right here with us.
question?
Not so much a question, but more of a.
You should come up here and get behind this microphone.
I'll take. It's not so much a question, but more of something general information to share as well. Like this resource was really helpful and I'm definitely using it. One thing that I have also been using too is an at-home phone called Urban Archive. I think it's really useful too, even for like the people that have said that they want to research by building. You can kind of just scoot around the map, kind of like Google Maps, and click on whatever, and it will pick up a picture and show you some recent history or the older history as well. It's called Urban Archive.
Urban
Urban Archive.
Yeah, so I think it's also a really good tool as well to add to this.
That's an app.
Yeah. And I'm wonderful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yep.
Anything more on the Lion Brewery, down the street from Amity?
He's asking anything else on the Lion Brewery. Boy, is this a big, wide open subject that we're gonna jump on big time, right? We haven't figured out how we're gonna jump on it, but we're gonna jump on it. Again, I think was the largest employer I've ever stayed over. Say it.
It was the first, I've been here for 33 years. It's the first time I ever heard that we had a brewery.
Yeah, it morphed into Bernheimer and Schmidt, and it's a little bit complicated and whatnot, but it came into our neighborhood probably just before 1860, before the Civil War. There's a painting of it in the collection of the Museum of the City of New York. And then you would think after that, we'd have other images, but that's not the case. Some of the best images are the ones when they were building the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and it kind of peers into the distance. If you go onto eBay, you could get Lion Brewery beer bottles.
There's a blog about it on our website.
Yeah,
Scroll through the blog. That we did. Thank you.
yeah,
A few years ago. There's probably more to learn, but it's a start.
yeah. Pam, who did yeoman's work on that, you also did. Anybody ever hear of Little Coney Island? That's another blog of a neighborhood of ill repute on 110th Street. They read about that. But our blog is incredible. In fact, Pam did a recent blog on traffic fatalities from way back when in the neighborhood. But the Lion Brewery is still a challenge. We're gonna get to that. So it existed from the late 1850s up to, I think it officially closed in around 1940 or so, but I could be off by 5 years. And one of the last owners of it was Frederick Cordair, the Cordair Brothers law firm. I'm reading a history of the Cordair Brothers now just to see if that has any references to it, but I know it doesn't. So, and then a lot of people ask any connection with Lion and Columbia, and the answer seems to be no.
I have the Architect's Guide to New York. It's about, mine is 22 years old or so. And I've looked at buildings in our neighborhood. It's a long, thin book. Do you know that book?
AIA,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that doesn't have anything on the Lion Brewery.
But it does on buildings.
Yeah,
My building
yeah,
on Riverside.
Peter, first.
Jim, doesn't Manhattan Avenue come out of the cart horses trying to be safe from going up and down and dying on Columbus Avenue? Manhattan Avenue right over here was not sure that it was not a part of the original grid, but it was done because of the slopes on Columbus Avenue. And I've always thought it was because of the brewery being here and the loss of horses.
I heard that Gil Talbot here, whose website on old street names is very insightful. So he knows streets intimately. The Bloomingdale Road, which came up here in 1708, is the oldest road, simply replaced by Broadway. Manhattan Avenue, I think, is the second oldest.
Well, it was put on the map in 1870.
Yeah.
You know, part of that general, overhaul of the street plan that was done after the Civil War. And there are some writings of Andrew Haswell Green, but they don't get too specifically into why. I haven't found any specific explanation for the insertion of Manhattan Avenue, but it looks like it had something to do with easing a steep slope, because otherwise they would have had to go west on 110th Street, and there's kind of a steep slope there, so that's a possibility, but that'll take further research.
Getting into a lot of detail there. Wait, yeah. By the way, I just discovered this morning that the word factoid, Rosmarino's factoid, it's attributed to all people, someone who lived in our neighborhood at 250 West 94th Street, Norman Mailer. Attributed.
Two things I'll mention. One is, and Rita, I didn't hear you mention it, could say more, but we're trying to get, we're in transition to get some library on digital. And Rita researched the Omega website, anyway, the system. So some of the most interesting things in our files are now available digitally. And
You just say westsidehistory.org. You click on VNHG library collections and keep following the links. And you get to this Omega archive where you can download entire documents and read the whole thing.
some of the best stories are up there. Research, dating checks, many of the organizations that you present. If you're interested, catch me outside, we can talk in the future, but just know that there's ongoing stuff. And if you have ideas for things you'd like to see, let us know. Thanks.
One more quick thing, someone left this ear pod on the speaker. Is it anyone? Oh, thank you.
So I think that ends the formal part of the program. The library needs to close at 7, but we have a few minutes for informal chat and informal questions. Thank you all so much for coming.